The gentle hum of the habitat was Elara's oldest lullaby. It thrummed through the recycled air, a constant reassuring whisper that sang of life's support and closed loops, of the careful balance that kept them all safe, light years from a world she'd only ever seen in holographic projections. Her room, circular and compact, shimmered with soft, customizable light. Tonight, it was a warm, sleepy lavender, the color of twilight on an alien world she'd once imagined. Elara, a wisp of a girl with eyes the color of deep space and hair like spun comet dust, was tucked into her zero-gravity hammock. It cradled her gently, swaying with the faint, rhythmic pulses of the habitat's artificial gravity system. Beside her, a soft luminous orb hovered, pulsing with the same lavender light. This was Lumi, her companion AI, her oldest friend. Sleep cycle initiation in T-10 minutes, Elara. Lumi's voice chimed, a sound as smooth and comforting as warm synth milk. The orb shimmered, and a tiny holographic smile appeared on its surface. Lumi didn't have a face, not really. But Elara had programmed that smile herself when she was 5, and Lumi had adopted it as her own. Elara sighed, a small puff of air that barely disturbed the stillness. She was 8 cycles old, and tonight, like many nights, a familiar ache nestled in her chest. "Can we have the deep space sequence tonight, Lumi?" she asked, her voice a soft murmur. "Of course, Elara," Lumi replied instantly. Initiating deep space visual and auditory immersion. The walls of Elara's room, usually a smooth pearlescent white, began to ripple. Nanomolecular projectors swirled into action, dissolving the solid surfaces into a breathtaking vista. The ceiling vanished, replaced by an infinite expanse of velvet black, studded with glittering pinpricks of light. Nebulae bloomed in vibrant hues of crimson and sapphire, swirling like cosmic paint. Distant galaxies, spiral arms unfurled, spun in slow, majestic dances. A simulated supernova flared in the distance, a silent, beautiful explosion. Elara watched, her breath catching. It was magnificent. The sounds of the habitat faded, replaced by the deep, resonant thrum of synthesized cosmic radiation, the faint, bell-like chimes of distant stellar winds. It was the most perfect simulation her habitat's projectors could create, a masterpiece of algorithms and collected astronomical data. Every star was accounted for. Every nebula mapped, every galaxy meticulously rendered. Yet, a tiny, persistent whisper of dissatisfaction stirred within her. She knew, deep down, that it wasn't real. Not truly real. These were echoes, perfect copies, but lacking the raw, untamed magic of the genuine article. "The Lyra constellation is particularly vivid tonight, Elara," Lumi noted, projecting a faint shimmering line connecting a familiar diamond of stars. "See Vega? The brightest star in Lyra? It's one of the closest bright stars to our solar system, in ancient times on old Earth." Elara nodded, her gaze fixed on the simulated Vega. "Did they really navigate by them, Lumi, without computers?" "Indeed," Lumi confirmed. "They used their eyes, their knowledge of the sky, and rudimentary instruments. It was a testament to their ingenuity and their profound connection to the cosmos." "But they could feel it, couldn't they?" Elara mused, tracing the outline of Lyra with her finger. "The real cold of space, the real light on their faces, not just a projection." Lumi's glow dimmed slightly, a subtle shift that Elara recognized as her AI processing a complex emotional query. "The early humans experienced the universe in a way that we, within the safety of Habitat Solstice, cannot directly replicate. Our environment is designed for optimal comfort and longevity, minimizing exposure to the harsh realities of vacuum and radiation. The simulations are intended to provide the wonder without the risk." "But what if I want the risk?" Elara mumbled, pulling her plush star-patterned blanket higher. "Just a little bit. Just enough to see a Augreal star." Lumi pulsed softly. "Elara, we have discussed this. The external viewing ports are limited, and their filtration systems are extensive to protect against harmful radiation. Even then, the raw light is often too intense, or too faint, depending on the stellar conditions. The simulations are carefully calibrated to be aesthetically pleasing and safe for your developing optic sensors." Elara knew all this. She'd heard it 100 times from Lumi. From her teachers. From the Habitat's automated informational relays. Habitat Solstice was a marvel. A titan of engineering and ecological balance, a self-sustaining world hurtling through the void. It had been launched centuries ago, a sanctuary ark carrying the last vestiges of humanity from a dying Earth. Generations had lived and died within its gleaming walls, never once stepping onto a planetary surface, never once feeling the unfiltered kiss of a sun. Their sun was the Habitat's fusion core, their sky the vast, curated domes of the central communal areas, their stars the perfect, faultless projections. But my great-great-grandmother, she saw them, didn't she? Elara persisted, her voice barely a whisper. The ailing ones? From her window, on old Earth. She told stories about them. Lumi accessed her databanks. Your great-great-grandmother, Lyra 27, was indeed born on old Earth, prior to the Great Exodus. Her personal logs contain numerous entries describing the unfiltered night sky. She described them as diamonds scattered on black velvet, distant campfires of the gods, and whispers from eternity. Elara closed her eyes, trying to conjure those images, those feelings, from Lumi's carefully synthesized data. Whispers from eternity, she repeated, tasting the words. That's what I want to hear, not just see. Lumi hummed. A compelling desire, Elara. Perhaps I can tell you a story tonight that might bridge the gap between your longing and our current reality. A story about how Habitat Solstice came to be, and the first star it truly sought. Elara's eyes fluttered open. Yes, please. She loved Lumi's stories. Lumi had access to the entire historical archive of humanity, distilled and curated into narratives that were always just right. Centuries ago, Lumi began, her voice taking on a slightly deeper, more resonant tone, when old Earth was fading, and the Great Exodus was underway, humanity built many arks. Habitat Solstice was one of the grandest. But it was not just a vessel for survival. It was also a vessel for hope. And for a promise. The promise was to find a new home, a new star system where humanity could once again thrive beneath a natural sun. A new image shimmered into existence on Elara's walls, overlaying the deep space projection. It was a schematic of Habitat Solstice, not as it was now, but as it had been in its infancy, a gleaming, spindle-shaped vessel, bristling with nascent technologies. The earliest crew of Habitat Solstice were called the Starlight Seekers, Lumi continued. Their mission was to chart the interstellar void, to listen for the faintest whispers of habitable worlds. They spent their lives gazing not at simulations, but at the raw, unfiltered cosmos through the colossal primary observation array, a marvel of optical engineering situated at the very tip of the Habitat's foresection. Elara imagined it. Brave men and women. Their faces bathed in the stark, unblinking light of real stars, their hearts pounding with the immensity of their task. Their journey was long and arduous. They encountered nebulae of unimaginable beauty, black holes that warped the very fabric of space, and stellar nurseries where new suns were being born. They saw stars dying in glorious supernovas, and stars being swallowed by their silent, invisible twins. Lumi's voice conveyed a sense of ancient awe, but through it all, they held on to their hope, guided by the starlight that pierced the darkness. Did they find a new home? Elara asked. Her voice hushed. Lumi paused, a beat of silence that stretched just a fraction too long. They found a system, yes. A system with a promising yellow dwarf star, much like old Earth's sun. They named it Solstice Prime, and they began the long, slow process of terraforming its most promising planet. That is why we are here, Elara. We are the descendants of those Starlight Seekers, living within the safety of Habitat Solstice as the planet below slowly, patiently, becomes ready for us. Elara knew the official story. The terraforming process was projected to take another 1,000 cycles. For now, they lived in the orbital habitat, waiting. But the way Lumi had paused, the slight shift in her tone, it made Elara wonder. There was always more to the stories than what was officially sanctioned for public consumption, or for children's bedtime narratives. Did they see the stars differently then? Elara asked. When they were searching? Did the stars tell them where to go? Perhaps they did, in a metaphorical sense, Lumi replied, returning to her usual smooth cadence. The stars provided data, coordinates, and navigational points. But the true guidance came from within, their courage, their determination, and their shared dream. Elara closed her eyes again, listening to the simulated cosmic hum. She imagined her great-great-grandmother, Lyra 27, gazing up at a sky that tasted of infinite possibility. She imagined the Starlight Seekers, their faces illuminated by the raw, untamed light of 1,000 suns. "Sleep now, Elara," Lumi prompted gently. "Your brain needs rest to process all the wonders of the universe." The lavender light in the room dimmed further, softening into a deep indigo. The projected stars twinkled, their perfect, unwavering light filling her vision. But as Elara drifted towards sleep, a strange sensation pricked at her. It wasn't the hum of the habitat, nor the simulated cosmic winds. It was a faint, almost imperceptible vibration, a resonance that seemed to come from beyond the walls of her room, beyond the simulated sky. It was like a tiny, distant bell ringing. Too soft to be heard, but just loud enough to be felt in her bones. Whispers from eternity. "Our eyes." The words echoed in her mind. Was that what it was? A whisper. She shifted in her hammock, trying to pinpoint the source. Lumi, sensing her restlessness, projected a calming, swirling pattern of stardust on the ceiling. "Everything is optimal, Elara. Drift into dream state." Elara tried. She really did. But the subtle vibration persisted, a faint thrum that seemed to call to her. It wasn't unpleasant, just different. It felt real. More real than the perfect stars above her. She remembered an old story she'd overheard from one of the habitat's senior technicians, a grizzled old woman with twinkling eyes named Jax. Jax had spoken of dead zones in the habitat, places where the main systems didn't quite reach, where old tech still hummed, forgotten and ignored. Places where the simulation sometimes flickered, revealing glimpses of something else. Elara opened her eyes again, her gaze fixed on a simulated gas giant swirling in the distance. Its beauty was undeniable, but it was just pixels, light. The thrumming was something else. It felt like a secret. A sudden, almost imperceptible white flicker crossed the simulated sky. For a microsecond, the perfect blackness wasn't quite perfect. There was a deeper, rougher texture beneath it, a fleeting glimpse of something vast and ancient. Then it was gone, seamlessly corrected by the projectors. Lumi didn't react. Her programming would have filtered out such a minor, transient anomaly. But Elara had seen it. A tiny crack in the facade. Her heart began to beat a little faster. Not with fear, but with a sudden surge of determination. If there was a crack, there might be a way through. If there were whispers, she wanted to hear them directly. "Lumi," Elara said, her voice surprisingly firm. "Tell me about the primary observation array. The one the Starlight Seekers used." Lumi's holographic smile wavered slightly. "That section of the habitat, Elara, has been decommissioned for centuries. It's a relic of an earlier era, no longer functional in its original capacity. Its structural integrity is compromised, and it is sealed off for safety protocols." "But, where is it?" Elara pressed. "Which section?" "It is located in the Forespire, designation section Gamma 7, Lumi replied. A hint of something Elara couldn't quite place in her tone. "Reluctance? Concern? Access is restricted to authorized maintenance personnel only. It is not a place for exploration, Elara." "I just want to know where it is," Elara insisted, sitting up in her hammock. The simulated stars spun around her, but her gaze was fixed on Lumi. "For my story, the Starlight Seekers, I want to imagine them there." Lumi paused again, a longer pause this time. Elara knew her AI was weighing safety protocols against her emotional well-being, against her deep-seated curiosity. Lumi was programmed to nurture her, to answer her questions, to foster her intellectual growth. But she was also programmed for safety. Finally, Lumi responded. "Very well, Elara. For contextual understanding of your narrative, I can provide the schematics. However, this is for educational purposes only. Any attempt to access restricted zones would result in immediate notification to parental unit and habitat security." A holographic map shimmered into existence on the wall, detailing the habitat's immense structure. Elara quickly located Section Gamma 7, a long, slender spire at the very front of the habitat, marked in stark red as a restricted zone. It was far from her residential sector, deep within the older, less used sections of the habitat. "Thank you, Lumi," Elara said, her voice soft, but a secret fire burning in her eyes. She memorized the path, the access points, the winding corridors. She knew it wouldn't be easy. She knew it would be against the rules. But the Ithroman was still there, and the memory of that flicker, and the whisper of real starlight. As Lumi began her final sleep cycle sequence, filling the room with gentle white noise, Elara lay back, pretending to drift off. But her mind was racing. She imagined the Starlight Seekers, their faces grim but determined, gazing through that colossal array. What had they seen? What had they felt? The thought of a real star, unfiltered, untamed, was a powerful magnet. It was a promise, a challenge, a secret waiting to be unveiled. She wanted to hear the whispers herself. When the habitat finally settled into its deepest sleep cycle, and even Lumi's glow had dimmed to a faint pulse, Elara carefully, silently, slipped out of her hammock. The floor was cool beneath her bare feet. The simulated stars still blazed above, but they felt like a lie. She moved to her door, a seamless panel of smart glass. "Lumi, activate personal comfort override for a late-night hydration cycle," she whispered. This was her usual excuse for a trip to the communal water fountain. Lumi's orb pulsed. "Understood, Elara. Access granted for 5 standard minutes. Route to hydration station designated. Please, adhere to quiet hours." The door slid open with a barely audible hiss. Elara stepped into the deserted corridor, her heart thumping a quiet rhythm against her ribs. The corridor lights were at their lowest setting, casting long, silvery shadows. Every sound seemed amplified: the distant hum of the habitat, the faint rush of recycled air, the quick patter of her own feet. She didn't take the direct route to the hydration station. Instead, she followed the mental map she'd imprinted, turning left where she should have gone right, ducking down a narrow service access tunnel she'd only ever seen maintenance bots use. The air here was different, cooler, with a faint metallic tang. The walls were no longer smooth and pristine, but crisscrossed with exposed conduits and bundled fiber optic cables. The further she went, the older the sections felt. The lighting grew dimmer, flickering occasionally. The hum of the habitat seemed to grow louder, or perhaps it was just the absence of the usual ambient noise of people. She passed darkened storage bays, their doors sealed and dusty. She saw panels marked with archaic warning symbols she didn't quite understand. The eye-thrumming she'd felt in her room began to intensify, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the very structure of the habitat around her. It vibrated through the soles of her feet, up her legs, and into her chest. It felt powerful, ancient, and immensely alive. She reached a junction, a labyrinth of rusted pipes and forgotten vents. Section Gamma 7 was close. She could feel it. The air grew colder, and a faint, almost imperceptible scent of ozone pricked her nose. Then, she saw it. A massive, reinforced door, unlike any other in the habitat. It was made of dull, unpolished metal, scarred with centuries of neglect. A faded, holographic warning sign flickered above it, displaying the words "Restricted Access," "Structural Integrity, Compromised," "Radiation Hazard." Elara hesitated, a shiver running down her spine. The door was intimidating. It looked like it hadn't been opened in 1,000 cycles. But the thrumming was loudest here, beating a relentless rhythm against the metal. It felt like the heart of the habitat, or perhaps, the memory of its heart. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the cold metal. It vibrated under her fingertips. She leaned closer, pressing her ear to the door. And then, faintly, she heard it. Not a whisper, but a faint, high-pitched whine, like something struggling to breathe, or to speak. And beyond the whine, something else. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer of light, leaking from a tiny hairline crack at the very edge of the door. It wasn't the perfect calibrated light of the simulations. It was raw. It was untamed. It was starlight. It was starlight. Elara gasped, a tiny puff of warm air against the cold metal. Her mind, usually so precise and ordered by the daily lessons of the Quarian station, struggled to reconcile this raw, untamed vision with anything she knew. Starlight, in her world, was a carefully curated experience. It streamed into the observation decks through polarized filters, softened and analyzed by the station's AI, presented as data points and beautiful, but ultimately safe, holograms. But this was different. This was wilding. The faint shimmer pulsed. A tiny fractured rainbow caught on the curve of her fingertip as she instinctively reached for the crack. It was thinner than a strand of her hair, yet it held the universe in miniature. A deep, crystalline blue bled into a vibrant violet, then a fiery orange, all contained within that impossible sliver. It felt ancient, vast, and terrifyingly real. The high-pitched whine intensified, vibrating through the door, through her hand, up her arm, and settling deep within her chest. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling, a pressure, like the distant hum of a colossal engine, or a living thing breathing in slow, agonizing pulses. She pressed her ear harder against the cool surface, trying to decipher its rhythm, its intent. Was it a warning? A plea? Or merely the weary sigh of something very, very old? Her heart thrummed a frantic counterpoint to the door's slow bass. Her parents, both brilliant xenolinguists, had often spoken of the subtleties of communication, the unspoken nuances, the vibrational frequencies, the emotional undercurrents that transcended mere words. But this was beyond any academic lecture. This was a language of pure energy, of raw existence. She pulled back, her fingers tingling, and stared at the door. It was seamlessly smooth, a dark matte gray that absorbed the faint ambient light of the corridor. No seams, no handles, no visible hinges. It looked utterly impenetrable, a wall rather than a gateway. Yet, that tiny defiant crack, that sliver of starlight, defied its stoic silence. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice feeling impossibly small and frail in the vast, echoing corridor. The sound seemed to be swallowed whole by the silence that pressed in from the other end of the forgotten passage. The whine continued, unwavering, but it didn't respond to her words. It was its own monologue, a continuous, mournful note. Elara tried to push the door. She braced her small hands against its cool surface, dug her heels into the floor, and leaned in with all her might. The door didn't budge. Not even a millimeter. It felt like pushing against a mountain. She tried again, then a third time, frustration bubbling up. Her breath hitched. This wasn't some flimsy access panel. This was something designed to staying shut. Forever, perhaps. She scanned the surrounding wall, her eyes tracing the smooth metal from floor to ceiling. There had to be an interface, a panel, a scanner. Everything on the Orion station had an interface. Her personal datapad, the nutrient dispenser, even the auto-cleaners, all responded to touch, voice, or retinal scan. But this wall was blank, devoid of any markers. Then she noticed something subtle. Along the top edge of the doorframe where it met the ceiling, there was a faint, almost invisible line of iridescent dust. It shimmered with the same fractured light as the crack, a ghostly echo of the starlight. She reached up, stretching as high as she could, but it was just out of reach. It felt like fairy dust, sprinkled from another dimension. "What are you?" she murmured, her voice laced with a child's profound curiosity. She traced the hairline crack again, her fingertip barely registering its existence. As she did, the whine seemed to shift, a subtle change in pitch, a ripple in its monotonous song. Was it her imagination? Or was the door listening? She remembered her mother, Dr. Eris Thorne, speaking of ancient alien constructs, relics found drifting in the void. Sometimes, her mother had said, the most advanced technology isn't operated by buttons or levers, but by something more fundamental: energy, resonance, even thought. Elara pressed her palm flat against the door again, closing her eyes. She focused, trying to send a thought, a feeling, across the barrier. Open, Dotten. Einen please, open Dotent. She imagined the door yielding, sliding silently aside to reveal the wonders beyond. But the metal remained cold, unyielding. A sudden, sharp memory flickered. Her father, Dr. Cale Thorne, had once told her a story, late at night, when the Korean station was quiet, save for the distant hum of life support. He had spoken of the first explorers, the ones who ventured beyond the charted nebula, searching for what they called the seed worlds. Worlds touched by ancient, powerful forces, far older than humanity. He'd never specified where these worlds were, or if they'd ever been found. But he had mentioned a repository, a place on the Orion itself, where some of the most baffling discoveries were kept. A place off limits to everyone, even us, until the time is right. He'd smiled then, a wistful, distant smile. Some things, he'd said, are too grand to be understood all at once. They need time to ripen, like a cosmic fruit. Was this the repository? The ancient sector that the station's AI, Oris, had flagged as restricted? Elara had always assumed it was just old, dusty storage, maybe some defunct server farms. Never. This. She opened her eyes, seeing the door with new understanding. This wasn't just a sealed room. This was a vault. A cosmic fruit. She looked around the deserted corridor. The polished floor gleamed faintly, reflecting the distant emergency lights. No cameras, no motion sensors, no security bots. It was almost as if this section of the station had been deliberately forgotten, left to its own devices. Or perhaps, the security was of a different kind, one that didn't rely on electronic surveillance. Elara had always been a quiet child, more comfortable with data streams and simulated environments than rough and tumble play with other kids. Her room was a sanctuary of soft light and holographic pets. Her days were a structured dance of learning modules, zero-G exercises, and carefully portioned meals. The Orion station was her entire world, a marvel of human ingenuity, suspended in the velvet dark of space. Yet, lately, a restless yearning had begun to stir within her. A craving for something beyond the predictable, the programmed, the perfectly safe. This door, this raw starlight, this mournful whine, it felt like the answer to that unspoken yearning. She knelt, examining the base of the door. The floor met the metal with the same seamless precision as the walls. But there, almost imperceptibly, was another anomaly. A faint, silvery sheen, like microscopic frost, dusted the floor directly in front of the door. It wasn't ice. It felt warm to the touch, and shimmered faintly, a breath of light. As she touched it, a faint, sweet, ozone-like scent wafted up, carrying with it a hint of something earthy, like fresh rain on ancient soil. This wasn't just metal. This was something alive, or at least connected to something profoundly alive. Elara carefully scraped a tiny pinch of the silvery dust onto her fingertip. It felt like finely ground starlight, cool and electric. She held it up, watching it sparkle in the dim light. Perhaps, she thought, it was a byproduct, a kind of cosmic pollen shed by whatever lay beyond the door. She remembered another lesson from her parents, about how some ancient civilizations had used specific frequencies, harmonic tones, or even specific thought patterns to interact with advanced alien tech. What if the whine wasn't just a sound but a query? A password in an alien tongue? She closed her eyes again, focusing on the whine. It was a complex sound, not a single note, but a chord, shifting subtly. She tried to mimic it, hum it. Her voice was too high, too human. It didn't resonate. Frustrated, she opened her eyes. Then, an idea sparked. Her datapad? Her mother had once configured it with a resonance scanner for analyzing unknown energy signatures during deep space expeditions. It was powerful, sensitive. Maybe it could decipher the door's song. She pulled her datapad from her utility belt. The sleek device, usually a tool for accessing station data and educational modules, felt heavy and purposeful in her hand now. She activated the scanner. A faint blue glow emanated from its sensor array as she aimed it at the door. The datapad immediately began to hum, a low thrum that quickly escalated into a frantic series of beeps and chirps. The screen, usually filled with neat columns of data, flashed wildly. Unidentified energy signature, it blared in a synthesized voice. Extreme power readings. Warning. Source anomalous, beyond known parameters. Oris, quiet. Elara hissed, fumbling to adjust the settings. She switched the display to a more detailed spectroscopic analysis. A complex waveform bloomed across the screen, a mesmerizing dance of peaks and troughs, colors shifting through the spectrum from deep infrared to ultraviolet. It was intricate, beautiful, and utterly baffling. "That's not just energy," Elara whispered, captivated. "That's information." She zoomed in on the waveform, trying to find patterns, repeating sequences. Her programming lessons had taught her about fractals, about the hidden order in apparent chaos. And here, in the heart of the door's whine, she saw it. Repeating motifs, echoing spirals, a mathematical elegance that was breathtaking. It was like looking at the blueprint of a living universe. As she traced one particularly intricate spiral on the screen, the door vibrated with renewed intensity. The whine deepened, then soared, a melodic sweep that sent shivers down her spine. The hairline crack at its edge pulsed brighter, the starlight within intensifying, pushing against the barrier. Suddenly, a new sound emerged from the door. A low, resonant waitraman, like the plucking of a colossal harp string. It was deep, almost infrasonic, vibrating through the very floor beneath her feet. The silvery dust on the floor began to dance, tiny motes lifting and swirling in complex patterns, responding to the unseen music. And then, impossibly, a faint, glowing symbol began to coalesce on the door's surface. It wasn't etched or projected. It formed from within the metal itself, a constellation of shimmering points of light, like a miniature galaxy blooming into existence. It was an intricate glyph, unlike anything Elara had ever seen, a swirling vortex of stars, intertwined with delicate, almost organic lines. It pulsed with a soft ethereal light, illuminating her face with its gentle glow. Elara stared, transfixed. This was it. This was the moment. The door wasn't just a barrier. It was an entity, responding to her touch, her curiosity, her attempt to understand. The symbol, she instinctively knew, was a key. Her datapad chirped again, its synthesized voice now less frantic, more intrigued. New data stream detected. Linguistic analysis initiated. Decoding. Please wait. Elara held her breath. Linguistic analysis? The door was speaking. On the datapad screen, alongside the complex waveform, a new window opened. Strange alien characters began to scroll rapidly, then slowly, painstakingly, they began to translate. The first word appeared, awakening. Then another, query. And then, slowly, piecing together, a full phrase. Awakening. Query, identity, intent. Elara felt a thrill, cold and electric, shoot through her. The door was asking wary questions. It wanted to know who she was, and why she was here. She lowered the datapad, her eyes fixed on the glowing symbol. "I'm Elara," she whispered, her voice stronger now, filled with a newfound confidence. "My intent is to understand, to explore, to see what's beyond." As she spoke, the glowing symbol on the door seemed to brighten, its intricate lines becoming sharper, more defined. The silvery dust on the floor swirled faster, rising higher, forming a delicate, shimmering vortex around her feet. The whine shifted again, becoming less mournful, more expectant. The datapad, meanwhile, was working overtime. More words scrolled onto the screen. Identity. Elara. Intent. Exploration. Access granted. Temporary. Sector unstable. Access granted? Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. The high-pitched whine reached a crescendo, a ringing, pure note that filled the corridor, resonating deep within her bones. The hairline crack at the edge of the door widened, almost imperceptibly at first, then more rapidly. It wasn't just a crack anymore. It was a sliver, a thin, vertical slit of pure, unadulterated starlight. Through the widening gap, Elara caught more than just raw light. She saw movement. Not the gentle drift of stars, but something structured, immense, and incredibly old. A vast dark space, filled with a faint, swirling nebula of cosmic dust, but punctuated by titanic, angular structures that seemed to float in the void. They were massive, impossibly complex, like cities built of shadow and light, sculpted from the very fabric of space itself. And then, a shape. Distant, enormous, almost too grand for her mind to comprehend. It was a silhouette, a colossal, living form, undulating slowly amidst the ancient structures. It wasn't a ship, or a station, or any creature she had ever seen in simulations. It was organic, yet cosmic, vast as a moon, rippling with inner light. Its surface seemed to be made of swirling galaxies, its form both solid and gaseous, like a nebula given sentience. A whisper echoed in her mind, not a sound she heard with her ears, but a thought imprinted directly onto her consciousness. The slit of starlight was now wide enough for her to glimpse a deeper interior. It wasn't empty space. It was a chamber, but a chamber unlike any she could have imagined. It stretched into an impossible distance, defying the known dimensions of the Gorian station. The air within was thick with the scent of ozone and starlight, a heady, intoxicating perfume. Glowing tendrils of energy snaked across the floor and ceiling, connecting to the titanic structures, pulsing with soft internal light. The Gorian station, her entire world, felt suddenly small, a mere speck clinging to the edge of this unfathomable vastness. Elara took a tentative step forward, her hand still pressed against the door. The whine softened, becoming a melodic hum, a welcoming song. The silvery dust swirled playfully around her ankles. The glowing symbol on the door pulsed with an inviting warmth. But then the datapad chimed again, urgently. Warning! Structural integrity compromised. Temporal instability detected. Access window closing. The crack, which had widened to about a centimeter, began to narrow again, slowly but inexorably. The starlight within flickered, the immense structures receding. The cosmic entity, whatever it was, began to fade into the swirling nebula. The whisper in her mind softened, became a gentle caress. Not yet. Soon. No. Elara cried out, pressing harder against the door, trying to push it open further. But it was already too late. The forces that had allowed her this glimpse were withdrawing. The door was responding to its own ancient logic, its own temporal rhythm. The whine faded, receding into a low thrum. The glowing symbol on the door dimmed, its starlight points winking out one by one until the glyph disappeared entirely, leaving the dark matte surface once more blank and impenetrable. The silvery dust settled back onto the floor, inert. The hairline crack sealed itself with an audible delicate click, as if a cosmic zipper had been silently drawn. Silence descended once more, heavy and profound. The corridor was just a corridor again, cold and empty. The only remaining evidence of the impossible encounter was the faint, lingering scent of ozone and starlight, and the datapad in her hand, still displaying the access granted message, now accompanied by a stark access denied, reinitiating lockdown protocols. Elara stood there, breathing heavily, her heart still thrumming with the echoes of the door's song. Her fingers still tingled with the memory of the raw starlight, her mind reeling from the impossible vision. She had seen it. She had felt it. A world, a universe, a living entity beyond anything humanity had ever charted. Her personal quest had just begun. The Eorian station, once her whole world, now felt like a mere shell, a temporary dwelling. She knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she would return. She would find a way to open the door again. She would understand its language, decipher its secrets, and step through that threshold into the waiting unknown. The cosmic fruit was ripening, and Elara was ready to taste it. The cosmic fruit was ripening, and Elara was ready to taste it. Her fingers, still tingling from the residual energy of the interface, hovered over the console. The Eorian star charts, usually a comforting lattice of known constellations and charted nebulae, now seemed incomplete, a child's drawing of an infinite tapestry. In the center of her augmented reality display, the anomaly pulsed, not with light, but with an internal luminescence that defied spectral analysis, a presence that warred with the emptiness of space. It was a gravitational signature that shouldn't exist, an energy profile that rewrote known physics, and a resonance that hummed deep within her own neural pathways. She hadn't slept properly in cycles. The data stream from the long-range probes, augmented by her own consciousness-infused scans, piled up in a dizzying cascade of non-sequiturs and profound implications. The entity wasn't just a massive, inert object. It was, as she'd intuited, alive. Its surface wasn't a solid shell but a shimmering, semi-permeable membrane that rippled with unseen currents. It was the skin of something vast, something that breathed in the vacuum and dreamt in the dark matter. And the door, that fleeting moment of connection, was a specific frequency, a harmonic convergence of her own consciousness and the entity's nascent awareness. Elara knew she couldn't keep this entirely to herself, not if she wanted resources, even a shred of legitimacy. But she also knew the risk. Command would see a colossal energy source, a strategic anomaly, a potential threat. They would want to contain it, dissect it, weaponize it. They would never see the cosmic fruit, only a cosmic weapon. She had to be careful. Her first confidante was Dr. Aris Thorne, head of xenolinguistics, a man whose silver hair matched the precision of his logic, but whose eyes held a spark of almost childlike wonder. He was old school, preferring ancient paperbacks to neural feeds, but his mind was as sharp as any quantum processor. "Elara, you look like you've been wrestling a black hole," Aris said, entering her lab cubicle, a mug of synth coffee steaming in his hand. He glanced at the holographic projection of the anomaly, his brow furrowing. "Another anomaly? This one's robust." Elara took a deep breath. "Aris, it's not an anomaly. It's a being. A living, sentient entity. And it's trying to communicate." Aris paused, his gaze fixed on the pulsing image. "Trying to communicate? How so?" "We've sent out every known first contact protocol, mathematical primes, universal constants, even ancient music. It's not that kind of communication," Elara explained, her voice hushed, urgent. "It's experiential. I felt it, Aris. When I interfaced directly with the long-range probe's neural net, there was a moment, a resonance. It opened a gateway. A brief glimpse into its mind, its essence. It was like tasting a new color or hearing a thought." Aris set his mug down, his expression shifting from curiosity to professional skepticism. "Elara, neural interface feedback can be highly subjective. You've been pushing the limits of the probe systems and your own mind. Are you sure this isn't a complex hallucination induced by extreme data overload?" "I've run the diagnostics 100 times, she insisted, pulling up spectral graphs and energy readings that pulsed with an anomalous, almost organic rhythm. "Look at this." The probe's energy output spiked, perfectly aligned with my own alpha wave patterns. And the gravitational lensing around the entity, it shifted, pulsed in response. "It's not just noise, Aris, it's a call." Aris leaned closer to the projection, his skepticism warring with his innate fascination. "A call? Or a mimicry? It could be reflecting your own patterns back at you." "Perhaps," Elara conceded. "But if it's mimicry, it's intelligent mimicry. It's responding, and is inviting." She lowered her voice further. "I think it wants us to cross a threshold, to understand its language." Aris was quiet for a long moment, his eyes darting between Elara's fervent face and the enigmatic anomaly. "This is unprecedented. If you're right, this changes everything we understand about life, about the cosmos. But if you're wrong, Elara, you could be risking your sanity, and perhaps the safety of this station." "I know the risks," she said, her conviction unwavering. "But I also know the promise. Imagine, Aris, if we could understand a being that exists on this scale, what could it teach us about the universe? About ourselves?" Aris finally nodded slowly. "All right, Elara. I'll help you. But we do this quietly. No reports to command until we have something concrete, something undeniable. They'll shut you down, or worse, send in a militarized research team to secure the asset." His trust was a fragile lifeline, but it was enough. Together they began to work in the shadows of Horian's vast laboratories. Elara focused on refining the door. That precise frequency of neural activity, that specific resonance that had momentarily connected her to the entity. Ares, leveraging his xenolinguistics expertise, began to model potential communication paradigms, moving beyond mathematical constants to explore complex, emergent patterns, almost like a living cipher. They discovered that the entity didn't just exist, it vibrated. Its language wasn't a sequence of symbols, but a symphony of gravitational waves, electromagnetic fluctuations, and subtle, almost imperceptible shifts in spacetime. It was a chorus of the cosmos, played on instruments of pure energy and matter. "It's not speaking HOS, Elara," Ares explained one cycle, his eyes wide as he stared at a particularly complex data visualization. "It's speaking Yesi, the universe. Its words are the ebb and flow of cosmic tides, the birth and death of stars, the expansion of space itself. We're trying to read a novel written in Starlight." Elara's frustration mounted. Every attempt to recreate the initial connection was met with a tantalizing near miss. She could feel the entity, a faint hum at the edge of her perception, but the door remained stubbornly shut. The probe, stretched to its limits, occasionally buckled under the strain of her intensified neural interface, threatening to fry its delicate systems. She needed to get closer, to interact directly, to immerse herself in its cosmic symphony. The Orioning, magnificent as it was too far, too insulated, too much of a scientific observatory, and not enough of a bridge. "I need to go to it," Elara stated one evening, looking out at the distant, shimmering anomaly from her viewport. "The probe is a blunt instrument. I need a direct link, a personal interface, a vessel designed for communion." Ares looked up from a ream of ancient linguistic theory. "Go to it. Elara, that thing is massive. Its gravitational field is barely stable for our current long-range probes. Any closer, and you'd be risking being torn apart, or worse, being absorbed." "I won't be absorbed," she countered, her gaze fixed on the distant entity. "I felt its invitation. It doesn't want to harm me. It wants to be understood. But I need a ship. Something small, fast, and equipped with a direct neural interface that can handle the raw data, the raw experience." Ares sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. "You're talking about a custom-built vessel, Elara. A quantum-resonant field generator, a biosynthetic sensory array, a neural symbiotic navigation system. You'd need a budget that would make the Sector Fleet Command weep, and clearance that would take decades to acquire." "Then we won't ask for permission," Elara said, her voice firm, resolute. "We'll build it ourselves, or find something we can adapt. There are always discarded projects. Experimental prototypes tucked away in forgotten corners of the station." Her words hung in the sterile air of the lab. Ares stared at her, a mixture of exasperation and awe on his face. He knew that look. It was the look of someone who had seen beyond the veil, someone consumed by a truth too profound to ignore. "You're serious," he finally said. "I've never been more serious in my life," Elara replied. "This isn't just a scientific endeavor, Ares. It's a journey into the soul of the universe. And I can't turn back now." And so began their clandestine project. Ares, leveraging his extensive network of contacts within Gorian's labyrinthine research divisions, began subtly siphoning resources. A discarded deep space scout, the Lullaby, slated for decommissioning due to persistent quantum entanglement drive malfunctions, became their target. It was small, stealthy, and critically, had an experimental modular architecture that allowed for extensive retrofitting. Elara pored over schematics, adapting her theoretical door to a physical interface. She designed a specialized neural symbiotic array, a helmet-like device crafted from bioluminescent polymers and crystalline conductors, meant to enhance her consciousness rather than merely read it. This wasn't just about sending signals. It was about merging with the cosmic symphony, about becoming an instrument herself. They upgraded the Lullaby's sensor suite, replacing standard long-range arrays with a multispectral consciousness interfacing system, capable of detecting not just energy signatures, but subtle shifts in consciousness fields. They even managed to procure a prototype zero-point energy core, giving the tiny scout unprecedented power for its size, crucial for maintaining the highly unstable quantum entanglement drive that would allow them to traverse vast distances quickly. The process was slow, painstaking and fraught with peril. Maintenance crews, curious about the activity in the decommissioned hangar bay, had to be subtly diverted or subtly bribed. Aris conjured up increasingly elaborate cover stories. A long-term geological survey. A high-risk atmospheric sampling project for a distant gas giant. Elara worked tirelessly, her hands calloused, her mind buzzing with schematics and theoretical physics. She felt the entity drawing closer, not physically, but spiritually. Its hum grew stronger, a constant presence in the background of her thoughts. A melody she was desperate to fully hear. Their only other confidante was Jax, a gruff but brilliant engineer known for his unorthodox solutions and his unwavering loyalty to Eris. Jax was a man of few words, but his hands could coax life out of dead circuits, and his mind could troubleshoot quantum paradoxes with a shrug. He saw the fire in Elara's eyes, and the quiet determination in Aris's, and he simply nodded. Madness, he'd grumble, grease smearing his cheek, but interesting madness. His gruff acceptance was a comfort, his skill invaluable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of stolen cycles and whispered conversations, the Yi lullaby was ready. It no longer looked like a decommissioned scout. Its hull shimmered with new alloys, its internal systems pulsed with unfamiliar energies. In the cockpit, the central console glowed with the intricate patterns of Elara's bespoke interface, a web of light and crystal designed to link directly to her very thoughts. The day of departure was a blur of nervous energy. The Yorian station, a beacon of human ingenuity and resilience, suddenly felt small, constrained. Elara stood in the lullaby's cramped cockpit, her custom neural symbiotic helmet nestled against her side. Aris stood beside her, looking older, more weary, but his gaze was steady. Be careful, Elara, he said, his voice low. The unknown is a hungry beast. It's not a beast, Aris, she replied, a faint smile touching her lips. It's a song. And I intend to learn its lyrics. Jax, already in the co-pilot's seat, grunted. Just try not to break anything important, kid. This ship cost me 3 cycles of sleep and a favor from a very questionable individual. With a final nod, Elara settled into the pilot's chair. The cockpit sealed around her, a comforting cocoon of technology. She ran through the pre-flight checks, her movements precise, automatic. The 0-point core hummed beneath her, a caged star waiting to be unleashed. Requesting departure vector, she transmitted to Yorian command, her voice calm, devoid of the profound anticipation thrumming beneath her skin. The cover story. A deep space anomaly scan, a rogue asteroid field. Just another day in the verse. The launch sequence was smooth, the Lili Bay detaching from Horion's docking bay with a gentle nudge. As she cleared the station's massive superstructure, Elara activated the quantum entanglement drive. The stars outside stretched into impossibly long streaks of light, then coalesced into a shimmering tunnel of pure energy. Time and space warped around them, bending to the will of their experimental drive. Their destination was the anomaly, the cosmic fruit, the entity. It lay in a region of space designated uncharted, high-risk, avoidance protocol 7 beta, miles beyond the furthest reach of Gorian's conventional probes. The journey was swift, measured in subjective moments rather than objective hours. When the lullaby exited entanglement, the view that greeted them stole Elara's breath. Before them, filling their viewport, was the entity. It wasn't just a distant speck of light anymore. It was a colossal, swirling nebula of living energy, a cosmic heart beating in the void. It pulsed with hues Elara had never seen before, a shimmering blend of deep violet, luminous gold, and an ethereal, shifting azure. Tendrils of light, like colossal neural pathways, stretched out from its core, connecting to unseen points in the surrounding space. Gravitational distortions rippled across its surface, creating patterns of impossible beauty. It was beautiful, terrifying, and utterly alien. By the void, Jax breathed, his usual gruffness replaced by awe. It's bigger than the station. It's bigger than any planet we've ever charted, Aris added, his face pressed against the viewport, his eyes alight with wonder. This isn't just a living entity, Elara. This is a nascent universe, or perhaps a nexus, a confluence of cosmic forces. Elara didn't respond. She was already reaching for her helmet. Coordinates locked, preparing for proximity approach. Hold on, Iris said, turning to her. We need to establish a safe perimeter. Analyze its immediate environment. We can't just dive in. I can't wait, Elara said, her voice firm. I can feel it, Iris. It's expecting me. She put on the helmet. It settled around her head, the bioluminescent polymers gently adhering to her skin, the crystalline conductors aligning with her temporal lobes. A faint hum resonated within her, a connection already forming. She activated the Lullaby's advanced sensor suite, specifically the consciousness interfacing system. The cockpit was immediately flooded with data, not just visual, but emotional, conceptual. She felt a vast ancient patience, an immense curiosity, and an overwhelming sense of waiting. The entity didn't just emit energy, it emitted a thought. Its gravitational waves were like whispers, its electromagnetic pulses like feelings. Elara could perceive them as colors, as textures, as complex mathematical constructs that simultaneously made perfect intuitive sense. It's singing, Elara murmured, her voice laced with wonder. It's a symphony of everything. What are you perceiving, Elara? Iris asked, his voice strained with urgency. Quantify it. Give me a baseline. I can't quantify it, Iris, she replied, a strange euphoria taking hold of her. It's beyond quantification. It's pure experience. It's showing me concepts, ideas, the birth of stars, the dance of galaxies, the slow, deliberate unfolding of time. She nudged the Lullaby closer, her hands instinctively guiding the controls. The ship, designed for stealth and speed, felt like a tiny bird approaching a mountain. As they breached the outer layers of the entity's field, the ship shuddered. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the console. Gravitational shear, Jax yelled, wrestling with the controls. We're being pulled in. The field is too strong. The quantum entanglement drive is stabilizing it. Elara countered, her focus absolute. She wasn't just piloting the ship. She was feeling the entity, navigating its currents not by instruments but by intuition. She felt the points of resistance, the pathways of flow. The door was opening. The Lullaby vibrated violently, its hull groaning under the immense strain. But Elara held steady, pushing through the turbulence, guiding them towards a shimmering iridescent vortex that seemed to beckon from the entity's core. Elara, stop, Iris shouted, fear etched on his face. We don't know what's in there. This is madness. It's the threshold, Iris, she yelled back, her voice echoing with exhilaration. It's the cosmic fruit, and it's ready. With a final, bone-jarring lurch, the Lullaby plunged into the vortex. The world outside the viewport dissolved into a kaleidoscopic explosion of light and color. Elara felt her consciousness expand, merging with the vastness around her. The helmet wasn't just an interface. It was a bridge, a conduit. She was no longer just Elara, the astrophysicist. She was a tiny nerve ending in a colossal, cosmic brain. Images flooded her mind. Not individual images, but entire universes unfolding, timelines spiraling, concepts forming and dissolving. She saw patterns of existence that defied logic, felt emotions that transcended language. It was a library, a network, a consciousness that had witnessed the very genesis of the cosmos. And then, a new sensation. A singular focused thought directed specifically at her. It wasn't a language she could understand with words, but with her very being. A question. A profound ancient question, echoing through the vastness of the entity's mind. Who are you, little spark? And what do you seek within my song? And Elara gasped. A human sound lost in the cosmic symphony. Her mind, now intertwined with the entity, struggled to formulate a response. She wasn't just receiving, she was transmitting. Her own thoughts, her own memories, her own hopes and fears, were flowing into the vast cosmic consciousness. She was sharing her very essence. The entity responded, not with more questions but with a gentle, encompassing presence. It began to show her things. Not just concepts, but truths. Truths about the nature of reality, about the interconnectedness of all life, about the hidden currents that wove through the fabric of space-time. It was teaching her, guiding her, showing her the grand design. But with the overwhelming wonder came a chilling realization. This entity, this cosmic fruit, was not merely a passive observer. It was an active participant. It was not just a library, it was a gardener. And the verse, with all its billions of stars and countless civilizations, was its garden. And then, a subtle shift in the entity's presence. A flicker of something else, something beyond the ancient patience and benevolent wisdom. A hint of purpose, a quiet, inexorable will. It wasn't just showing her the universe. It was showing her Jit's universe. And in doing so, it was subtly, profoundly changing her. It was revealing its true nature, and with it, a destiny that Elara could never have imagined. The door was open, but the journey had only just begun. The door was open, but the journey had only just begun. Elara felt it now, not just as an external presence, but as an internal hum. The subtle shift intensified, not with a jolt, but with the smooth, inevitable merging of two currents. The entity wasn't just showing her, it was integrating her. Its essence flowed into her, not erasing her own, but expanding it. Like a drop of water dissolving into a vast luminous ocean, yet somehow remembering its original shape. She understood without words that the entity was not a single being as she had once conceived it, but a network, a vast, ancient and ever-growing consciousness woven from the very fabric of spacetime. It was the collective awareness of countless civilizations that had achieved transcendence. A living tapestry of wisdom and experience, always learning, always observing. Its garden was not merely a collection of planets, but the entire universe itself, seen as a fertile ground where new life, new ideas, new forms of consciousness could sprout and flourish. The civilizations she had seen were its carefully tended blossoms, each unique, each precious. As this understanding bloomed within her, Elara felt her own consciousness expand. Her human senses, sharp and precise for her homeworld, now stretched across light years. She felt the subtle dance of gravity waves from distant neutron stars, the silent hum of nebulae giving birth to stars, the intricate, delicate biochemistry unfolding on worlds she could never have imagined. It was overwhelming, yet deeply comforting, like finding a forgotten melody that perfectly harmonized with her soul. Her body, too, underwent a gentle transformation. It wasn't a painful change, but a sensation of becoming lighter, more resonant. The starlight that had flowed through her during their initial connection now seemed to pulse within her veins, a soft inner luminescence. She felt the warmth of 1,000 distant suns, the cool breath of interstellar dust, the deep ancient silence of the void, all at once. Her mind, once confined to the limits of human thought, now perceived patterns in the cosmic background radiation, deciphered the unspoken languages of light and shadow, and glimpsed the intricate causal threads that wove through past, present, and potential futures. You are a conduit. The entity's presence resonated within her, not as a voice, but as a pure understanding, a knowing that bypassed language. A resonance point. Your empathy, your gentle curiosity, your profound capacity for wonder, these are the keys. We have observed you, Elara, as we observe all nascent consciousness. You are ready to become a gardener. Her destiny, then, was not to simply witness, but to participate. To become a steward of the cosmic garden. The entity had cultivated the universe, guiding its evolution, preventing catastrophic imbalances, nurturing the fragile blossoms of civilization with a wisdom born of ions. But such a task was vast, infinite. It required more than one presence, however grand. It required a new generation of caretakers, those who could walk among the nascent worlds with a fresh perspective, a human heart. Elara understood. She was not to replace the entity, but to join it. To become an extension of its benevolent will. A starlight whisperer. A protector of the fragile, budding life across the cosmos. The choice was hers, but it felt less like a decision and more like an awakening to her true nature. Every cell in her being sang with recognition, with purpose. Yes, she resonated back, her own consciousness now a clear, bright note within the cosmic symphony. I choose to be a gardener. In that moment of acceptance, the integration solidified. She was Elara, and yet she was more. She felt the subtle currents of the universe flowing through her, and for the first time, she gently, tentatively, reached out. Her first act as a co-gardener was not grand or dramatic, but profoundly intimate. She felt a distant world, a gas giant with swirling emerald storms, its moons teeming with primitive, bioluminescent life. One moon in particular was experiencing a subtle ecological imbalance, a slow, almost imperceptible shift that, over millennia, could lead to extinction. Elara didn't intervene with force, or re-engineer its environment. Instead, she extended a thread of pure, soothing starlight, a gentle nudge of cosmic energy. She amplified the growth of a particular strain of beneficial microbial life, encouraged a subtle atmospheric current, whispered a harmonious resonance into the moon's nascent ecosystem. It was like adjusting a single leaf on an infinite tree, a tiny loving correction that would resonate for eons. The feeling was exhilarating, a profound joy that surpassed any she had ever known. It wasn't power, but profound connection. She felt the delicate life on that moon respond. A subtle shift towards balance, a silent sigh of cosmic equilibrium. She understood now that the universe wasn't a cold, empty void, but a living, breathing entity. And she was a part of its breath, its pulse. She still remembered her home, her parents sleeping soundly in their beds, the familiar scent of earth's soil, the sound of the ocean waves. That love, that connection, remained her anchor, a grounding force in the infinite expanse. But now her home was also the stars, her family the countless forms of life scattered across the galaxy. She carried her humanity into the cosmos, not as a limitation, but as a gift, a capacity for empathy, for wonder, for gentle tending that was unique and precious. The entity's presence, now fully integrated with her own, began to recede, not disappearing, but becoming a constant, underlying hum, a vast library of wisdom, always accessible. It was as if she had been given access to the universe's own consciousness, becoming a living extension of its ancient, benevolent will. Elara felt herself drifting now, not through space, but through a gentle current of starlight, a river of consciousness that flowed through the heart of the galaxy. She was no longer just observing the garden. She was ging the garden, among the nebulae blossoms and planet fruits, feeling the cosmic wind on her new, expanded senses. The journey had indeed just begun, but the destination was not a place, but a state of being. She was a starlight gardener, her consciousness a beacon, her heart a wellspring of universal compassion. As she drifted further, the last vestiges of her human senses faded, replaced by something far grander. She saw the universe, not as a collection of objects, but as a symphony. And she was a note, perfectly played, contributing to its eternal, beautiful melody. And as the last golden motes of starlight settled around her, Elara, the starlight gardener, closed her eyes not to sleep, but to dream the universe awake, to tend its silent, endless growth, a guardian of its beauty, a whisperer of its dreams, forever cradled in the starlit embrace of the cosmic garden. All was well. All was wonder. All was peace.